there's a beautiful quote from someone, and it's definitely a poet, but I can't remember who said that childhood is our real homeland or our real country, and it doesn't matter where you grow up, but how you grow up.
Eleftheria came to the UK from Crete and is still grappling with the relationship between Greece and her adopted country. This is Writer's Mosaic, What We Leave We Carry, the series that tells the true life stories of migration to the UK.
If it was a season, my childhood would probably be spring, because it's like so much honeysuckle and so much like carnation and so much jasmine, and just like even the smell of the lemon like tree flower is so powerful. Warm but like breezy nights and a lot of music. My dad plays the lira, which is a traditional Cretan instrument. It's like a violin you put on your knee. And he was just playing the whole time. And we would also go as children, and this is probably one of my most powerful memories. We would go to a lot of festivities, like village festivities, especially in the summers. And they were outside, and they were catered, very sort of like carefully by, the women usually of the village, who must have spent hours peeling potatoes and frying them, and they were just the best fried potatoes that I've probably still ever had. I actually first came to England in 2003 as an exchange student in my undergraduate, and I stayed in Brighton for 6 months, and I loved it. It was really great, and I just learned so much and had such a different student experience to the one that I was having back home. A year and a half later, in 2005, I came to the UK to do my master's. And I remember telling myself, this is great. We're moving to the UK, you and me. We're going to stay there for a while. Not like a decade or anything, but like, let's stay. Like, let's not just go for the master's and come back. It's been almost 20 years now. I got on a plane from Crete, changed to another plane in Athens, and came to the UK. And I remember the feeling of like lots of blurry greens and greys and browns, and the kind of like colorscape was really interesting to me. It was very fresh. It was like probably raining at the time. It must have been around September, and I was coming from a very hot place to a place that was humid but like not hot at all. And it was very exciting to be in double-decker buses. It was super exciting to be in double-decker buses. It was in London, and we must have walked everywhere. He was living around Kentish Town at the time, and we would just walk downtown and browse the old secondhand bookshops and, do all the kind of like quirky things you want to do when you're like a young person who's interested in poetry. Myself, I'm interested in poetry and writing and cinema and the arts. That was a big thing. I was probably overdressed when I was looking at other people. And I remember that I was also realizing that this is a different kind of English to the English that you're taught at school. My personal possessions at the time were probably my laptop, books, diaries, probably a lot of trinkets from back home, come to think of it. Definitely lots of things my friends sent me off with, like a lot of letters. They did this big night for me before I left, I just remembered, and like everyone wrote like a note and put it in a whiskey bottle or something, and I must have carried that whiskey bottle with me for a very long time. What surprised me and continued to surprise me for a very long time is that I occasionally got invitations to people's homes, but very rarely to English people's homes. It was a quiz in my mind. It was like a strange anecdote. Like, I mean, is there something cultural about opening up your door to other people, or is it just random? And it just so happened that the English people that I meet weren't, disposed to like having a visitor. I had incredible like midwifery support throughout both of my pregnancies, and I was always in praise of like midwives in the UK. That aside, despite the wonderful care, I had this one incident again with this health visitor who walked in our flat. I had the baby in my arm, like the 2-year-old was sort of trailing behind me, and she, I swear, like didn't look at me, didn't look at the children. She looked at the flat. She was like, how long have you been here for? And I said, well, I think it's 3-4 years. And she said, oh, do you buy or sell? I said, it's ours. Where are you from? Greece. Why don't you, and I don't think this is the question that she asked me, but she basically said, why are you here? And like, are you going back? And I was like, I just let that go again in not a very dissimilar fashion to the 20-year-old version of me, because I didn't really needed to like engage with that at the time. But then I thought about it, and then I was like, what kind of racist person walks in your flat, like when you are like a young mother, and asks you, why are you here and when are you going back? So, but it's not particular to the UK, but these are the two very strange and like unnerving racist experiences that I've had. I really love to be able to walk down the street and to just walk down the street and choose to talk to people if I want to talk to people. And I also enjoy when I have the chance to sit by myself and not be like, interrupted, and be in a train and sometimes like just have your headphones on and let the world pass you by. That doesn't happen to me when I go to Greece at all. I am never alone, and that's normal because I go there for a limited time. But I remember when I was sort of like adjusting to life in the UK, I was going back and I was like, why are there people joining me on my table when I'm clearly wanting to sit down and read my book by myself? So my partner's mother has made us these blankets, like hand knitted blankets with like just so many different motifs, like different like shapes and like colors, and like it's this beautiful thing, and it's handmade, and it's traditional. And so like that for me, like that blanket is, as well as some other rugs that are made with a loom that she's also given us, are really like the objects that I associate with like Greece the most in our home. If you asked me on a different day or a different year or like time, whether in the past or the future, what really strikes me as different and sort of like a little bit annoying about the difference between like being in Greece and being in the UK is basically, or being in another country basically and being in the UK, the thing that I really cannot settle with is the fact that after 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the evening, you do not see young people outside, you don't see children outside, you don't see even older people outside. It's a particular demographic that can hit the streets at night, and it makes it feel, it's always made it feel a little bit unsafer in that way, because you don't have families hanging out, you don't have like, groups of people who are just spending time, like not necessarily going for a drink, or even like, because I spend time in the US, like even the possibility of walking in a mall, like, or a shop, like at 9 o'clock in the evening, always felt like a safe experience for me. Whereas here, like on Saturday night, I had, before kids, made the choice of really not going out because of the hustle and bustle of the Saturday night fever. That's about the only thing that I think I would change if I could. With a global financial crisis, which was mostly a sort of like Western world financial crisis, and the austerity measures that passed in Greece, and the sort of like mass migration from Greece, like in the 2011-2012 year, and because Greece became a sort of scapegoat for the financial crisis in Europe, like it's their fault, we're paying for them, they're lazy, they're just sitting and enjoying themselves while the rest of us Europeans are working. That's also really definitely worsened the stereotype of like the Greek as a lazy non-worker, yet one which is coming to us to kind of get our jobs type of thing. It's a very complex one with regards to Greek stereotypes, because I've often been told by people when I tell them that I'm Greek that, oh, you don't look like Greek because you don't like yell a lot, you're not very loud. I'm like, okay, well, you want to see me loud? Is that an invitation? I don't think the majority of English people or British people know and understand the complex relationship between Britain and Greece, let alone like Britain and the rest of the world. It's a very complex one, and it's not really documented very well in history books. And for us, like who have done history classes in Greece, Britain definitely featured as an ally, a partner, always in a very positive light in the history books. But yeah, you dig a little bit deeper and you find Britain intervening in strategic moments and sort of like steering the political game to their benefit. The thing that always strikes me is the fact that Oxfam, which a lot of people know and love, was actually started as a campaign to provide relief to famine in Greece following the Second World War. So I don't think people know that. But there's a lot of layers to this story of Britain providing for the world, and especially like Oxfam and the kind of like culture and general sentiment of philanthropy and charity, which starts at the Victorian times, but always like featured this relationship of dependency between the benefactor and whoever is that benefits from that. So there's a strange sort of like lightly colonial or semi-colonial relationship, to be like really polite about it, between Britain and Greece particularly. The more you stay here, the more prone you are to being more polite, or like performing politeness publicly rather than actually being polite, which is more complicated. But I admit to just discovering that when you say yes, you should always follow it with please, and when you say no, you should always follow it with thank you, only like 14 or 15 years after being in the country. So I was a latecomer to the light sort of like politeness inserted here and there in conversation. Britain was definitely a major player in ruling over the country for different periods of time. At the same time, in sort of like the Greek imaginary and maybe the British imaginary, like Lord Byron, there are a lot of like British figures featured in the national independence. So that's the kind of like official story which a lot of people like to espouse and celebrate. So the colonial sort of history is always a little bit under the carpet, whereas the more sort of like, oh, we help you liberate yourselves from the Ottomans sort of like story is more sort of like thrown upon the surface. But that's always the way in which colonialism has operated in terms of like underplaying the injustices and the barbarism and like overplaying the positive sort of like economic, organizational, like cultures they have imparted. When I think about my own like story and how I ended up here, it's definitely got to do with, you know, Britain building itself up as a beacon of like higher education, as the place you go to get educated in Europe. Like it very much attracted me and a lot of people through the kind of like soft power of higher education, which is not the same as the hard power that it has when my kids grow up and they either self-declare or answer to someone who's asking them where does their allegiance lie. I suppose I would be very happy with them knowing like where they grew up, because eventually, like, there's a beautiful quote from someone, and it's definitely a poet, but I can't remember who said that childhood is our real homeland or our real country, and it doesn't matter where you grow up, but how you grow up. So for me, I would be happy with them saying whatever they feel like saying, but knowing that they grew up and they had a childhood which was safe, open, like exposed to, you know, their parents' weird, like quirky, like habits, like food-wise, music-wise, you know, their sort of like language, which for me is, I think, more important than like what they say. I want them to be able to communicate rather than, you know, say I'm British or English or Greek or like British Greek. I want them to be able to say whatever it is they want to say in like at least these two languages. The thing that I wanted to say is that I feel like I became an adult in this country, whereas before I was a child, really.
Eleftheria was talking to Maria Jastrzębska.